Hello, and welcome to the Chief Among Them podcast. My name is Vernon.
My name is Nathan.
My name is Drew.
And we are fellow Christian men who just want to dive deeper into God's Word and learn more about it. We get our name, Chief Among Them, from 1 Timothy 1, 15 through 17. This is a faithful saying and worthy of all acceptance that Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am chief. However, for this reason I obtained mercy, and that me first, Jesus Christ, might show all long-suffering as a pattern to those who are going to believe on him for everlasting life. Now to the King eternal, immortal, invisible, to God who alone is wise, be honor and glory forever and ever. Amen.
Hello everyone, this is Vernon here. I just want to apologize for the lack of uploading. It's just the past couple months have been extremely busy for all three of us. Mainly me and Nathan because Drew doesn't have a life. But yeah, so like last week we had the fair, and the week before that we had Prairie Camp, which was like a kind of a retreat that our church and a couple other churches get together and do. So like life has just been crazy. So I haven't had time to edit / upload. But the good thing because of that is now we have a ton of extra content. About 4 or 5 episodes that we have a little bit extra that we have as backups. So this shouldn't happen again for a long time. I'm not going to say it will never happen again because life is insane and we don't know what's going to happen. But at least for right now, we're good for quite some time. So we should be back starting with this episode to every other week, putting out new episodes every other week. Also want to apologize for the quality of the audio. There are some settings that were wrong with my microphone for this episode and our last episode we did with discipleship with Pastor Jacob. Those things have been fixed, and we actually have a new mic now that works a lot better and we think picks up a little bit more of the lows from Nathan and Drew's side, so they're actually a little bit louder. So yeah, thank you for watching, thank you for being patient, and thank you for listening, and we just hope you enjoy the rest of this episode.
Starting, we're going to be talking about the first murder and pre-flood world, what that could have looked like, and kind of the implications it gives us as I guess
Kind of how the rest of humankind would be.
Yeah. So today we have a very special guest, the rock that killed Abel. You have anything to say?
He's speechless. He knows what he did.
That's true.
Oh, that's right. He's an inanimate object.
Oh, duh.
Yeah, because inanimate objects can't kill people on their own. People kill people, not inanimate objects.
Correct. It's been a while since I've made drinks.
So is this drink.
We're drinking alcohol because Christians can do that because Jesus made wine. And if Jesus made wine, then alcohol is fine because Jesus would never do something that would forcefully lead someone to sin.
Also, we're responsible.
Yes.
We're not getting hammered.
The Glock has been put away, as you can tell.
Also, Paul said a little wine is good for the belly, and he wasn't talking about grape juice.
Amen, brother. All right, so we are going to start in Genesis 4 by reading Genesis 4, 1 through 16.
Also, there's a point I made in an earlier episode that is reiterated in Genesis chapter 5. It's almost like God thought that was important.
Pistachios.
Pistachios are okay.
They're expensive though. This bag was like $10. It's absurd.
It's just that brand.
Maybe.
Anyway, keep looking at the computer because usually computer is by the camera, but it's not anymore. We've rechanged our set a little bit to fit some unforeseen changes that had happened downstairs. Chapter 4, verses 1 through 16. Now Adam had sexual relations with his wife Eve, and she became pregnant. When she gave birth to Cain, she said, "With the Lord's help, I have produced a man." Later, she gave birth to his brother and named him Abel. When they grew up, Abel became a shepherd, while Cain cultivated the ground. While it was time for the harvest, Cain presented some of his crops as a gift to the Lord. Abel also brought a gift, the best portions of the firstborn lambs from his flock. The Lord accepted Abel and his gift, but he did not accept Cain and his gift. This made Cain very angry, and he looked dejected. "Why are you so angry?" the Lord asked Cain. "Why do you look so dejected? You will be accepted if you do what is right. But if you refuse to do what is right, then watch out. Sin is crouching at the door, eager to control you, but you must subdue it and be its master." One day, Cain suggested to his brother, "Let's go out into the fields." And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Afterward, the Lord asked Cain, "Where is your brother? Where is Abel?" "I do not know," Cain responded. Am I my brother's guardian?" But the Lord said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are cursed and banished from the ground, which has swallowed your brother's blood. No longer will the ground yield good crops for you, no matter how hard you work. From now on, you will be a homeless wanderer on the earth." Cain replied to the Lord, "My punishment is too great for me to bear. You have banished me from the land and from your presence. You have made me a homeless wanderer. Anyone who finds me will kill me." The Lord replied, "No, for I will give a sevenfold punishment to anyone who kills you." And the Lord put a mark on Cain to warn anyone who might try to kill him. So Cain left the Lord's presence and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. So first murder. I mean,
It's not,
every young Christian knows this because of Sunday school, but
yeah. Well, and it's also not confirmed that it was like a rock or anything. It says that Cain did it. So it could have been a rock. It could have been a knife. It could have been a
it
strangle.
could have been his own hands.
Yeah.
Smeagoled him.
Oof.
Well. Yeah. Before we get to that, like
That is a really cool parallel between Lord of the Rings and the Bible. That.
Also, this is completely. I'm jumping way ahead to the tail end where he moved to the land of Nod because this isn't deep or theological at all.
Mhm.
I just find it really interesting that in the Command and Conquer's game, they have Command and Conquer's Cain's Wrath, and Cain is the leader of the Brotherhood of Nod. It's spelled different. Like Cain is spelled different, but Nod is spelled the same.
You really want to play that game, don't you?
What?
The Commanders and Conquerors.
Yes, I want to play Command and Conquer so bad. I have Command and Conquer Realer 3. I just don't have a mouse to play it with. I just was reading it. I was reading this earlier to like kind of take notes, and I just thought it was really interesting. I was like, Brotherhood of Nod. Where have I heard? Oh, Brotherhood of Nod from Command and Conquer. He conceived and bear Cain. I think it's really interesting that Cain was the oldest one.
Mm-hmm.
I also think it's interesting. I was reading somewhere when I was like kind of doing my notes earlier, and again, look this stuff up on your own. Do research. Ask your pastor if we say anything wrong. Like
We probably have.
because it says in this it says, "And Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man." One of the versions I was reading earlier said, "I have acquired a man," and it was one of the things that one of the sidebars was that Cain literally means to have received or to have acquired. I could be wrong. Double check me on that.
So my footnote here has I have produced the man.
The man. He's him.
Yeah,
Cain-
it says
Cain's
I have
name.
gotten a man. Like achievement.
It says in there or I have acquired Cain. It sounds like the Hebrew term which can mean produce or acquire.
Achievement unlocked. Acquire a man.
The Xbox Diamond thing. That's really interesting. Think about. I like the beginning of because like you hear the Bible story. It's like, oh, Cain, bad guy.
Acquire craftsman spear.
Maybe that's why he killed him.
Caddy thingy. Huh?
Maybe that's why. Oh, maybe that's why it's spear because like he killed Abel with a spear.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Well, when we get farther into it, I saw some interesting stuff about like apparently in Talmudic like tradition, like the mark that God gave Cain was a horn, so he grew a horn out of his head.
Interesting.
I don't know how
He became-
accurate that is because Talmudic tradition is a lot of
Isn't that also where Lilith comes
very-
from?
I believe so.
Yeah.
yeah. That's also where golems come from. Actually, I'm pretty sure.
Golems and like there's another creature I can't think of. Rocks, giant birds.
Oh, the giant eagles.
They're all from like Talmudic, Arabic tradition type stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I like the beginning because like as a kid you hear like most everyone who's heard the story of Cain and Abel has heard it in Sunday school. Cain bad killed Abel. Cain got cursed. Abel good had new son Seth. But I like this here where God's like, you need to do what's right or you're going to fall to sin. But if you refuse to do what is right, then watch out. Sin is crouching at the door, eager to control you. But you must subdue it and become its master. I like that. That's added in. Like God is telling Cain, like, hey, you can't let this fester. It's going to take. You need to take it over before it takes you over.
And like God Himself is directly warning Cain before it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, if you let this grow,
Mm-hmm.
and Jesus talks about in the Beatitudes, talking about, if you've murdered a man in your heart, then it's the same as murdering it. Like, that's murdering the man in your heart is the first step.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, meaning, probably at this point, he's probably already thought about killing his brother at this point. Another interesting thing is this is the first generation after leaving the garden.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately, we went to murdering each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Humans,
That's another thing.
Do that.
That's a note I wrote when we were originally planning this to be the third episode. Was that Abel was probably not only like the first to be murdered, but maybe probably the first to
I think
die.
it was the first to be murdered because the Bible directly says it being the first murdered.
I guess.
The first to die. I don't
Interesting
know.
if the first man to die was murdered.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the first person that the Bible talks about.
It's very indicative of our state as humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing. 2, she bare his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Listen up, vegans.
That was another thing I was going to ask.
just think
what do
it's
you guys think the significances of their sacrifices?
Well, the significance of the meat is good for God. You're just giving me kind of the scraps of your.
Mm-hmm.
You're giving me the scraps of your tilling of the ground. Like, I'm sure that God would have considered it an acceptable offering if He had actually given him the best of the fruits.
Right.
Maybe. But also maybe it's like that it has to be that symbol of Christ in the future. So like maybe it has to be blood.
I don't necessarily know if it has to be blood.
Maybe it just has to be an animal.
Maybe it could just be the base of he didn't give something good enough. He wasn't giving his best, which that's a good parallel as well. Looking at like the way we live our life as Christians today, do we really give God the best that we can give him? The answer is no.
Not always. Not usually.
I like to say the answer is always no, because then you are always in the state of continuing to grow and be better.
If you're wearing Balenciaga on stage and preaching, and there's people in your congregation who are poor, then you are not giving God your best.
Joel Osteen. Sorry.
No, that was not Joel Osteen. That was
I was just naming that only one I really know.
Stephen Furtick.
Never heard of him.
He's the guy who writes a lot of he does a lot of stuff like Hillsong and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure he's actually the pastor at Hillsong.
Oh, that brings up a thought we were thinking about doing a Christian entertainment episode with a couple of our friends who have different views than we do when it comes to certain things as far as Christian entertainment.
I feel like we all have different views, but then we all have quite a bit of overlapping. Because you and I are pretty overlapping on the worship music, but then we have different views on stuff like Chosen. Yeah.
Which would be really fun, interesting conversations to have when it comes to that. We have a guest that we'd like to bring on. It'll have to be through the internets. Yeah, I don't know if it's necessary. We have what the Bible tells us, and gleaning from what the Bible tells us, the base is just it wasn't the best he could have given.
Yeah. Whatever it was that he was doing, it was not good enough for a sacrifice for an offering.
Yeah. But I find it interesting that it's like.
It probably wasn't even that the fruit wasn't good enough. It was probably that because he had the attitude of I'm going to keep the best and then give God the scraps.
Right.
Right,
but I think another thing to look at that's interesting is there's no wrath from God that's taken out on him because of the offering.
Yeah, he's just
God's just like, hey, I would bless you more if you did better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would bless you more if you were closer to me.
He was just jealous of his brother's blessing.
Yeah, and then
His
pride takes over and he kills his brother.
He was also probably jealous of his brother's closeness with God.
Yeah,
that might be.
I have a fun quote that Pastor Jake actually said one Sunday. You heard from someone else that I can't remember, but you are as close to God as you want to be. God never is going to be like, I don't really want to get close to you right now, so I'm going to let you be alone for a little bit. It's solely on us and how much we allow God to enter in our lives. So it's interesting looking at that towards Cain's situation, because like deep down he didn't want to give the best of what he had. He wanted to keep it, and that ultimately led to him being a little bit more distant from God because he was putting that distance there, and then jealousy grew, which God even warned him about, and then he let that overtake him and kill his brother.
Yeah.
Well, God even told him, like, hey, if you do better, like, you're not gonna have to worry about the jealousy stuff. Like, he just didn't want to do better.
Mm-hmm. You don't want to put in the effort.
He wanted the reward without the work.
Yeah. So I think a lot of Christians nowadays are like that in a different sense. Like, they want the grace of God, but they don't put in the work to not accept it because it's a gift. Well, I guess accept it, yeah. I guess not to earn it because it's a gift. It's not something that we can earn. It's something that's given, but not accepting it for fully what it is because they don't want to give up something that they're holding on to. It's like with Cain, giving up his good fruit that he wanted to keep. So, yeah. I like that. That's good.
Also, the talk between Cain and Abel that we can cover.
Yeah.
It says Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and slew him.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, this was something that Cain probably expressed anger to his brother multiple times about.
As possible.
Or at least once.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because it's kind of implying that he's talking about this subject of, like, why is your offering better? Or I'm upset that your offering is more respected by God than my offering.
Right.
And his brother probably told him, like, hey, it's because I give him my best, and you're not giving him your best.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then he probably was like, okay, well, we're out in the field. I'm just going to beat you to death. Or strangle you, or whatever he used. Or
I like, I don't know, because of the Lord of the Rings thing, I like the parallel of him strangling with, like, the Smeagol and, what's the other one? Deagle. I like that comparison. But,
yeah, especially when you think of the ring as...
It's almost like Tolkien was Catholic and knew these things.
Especially when you, like, think of the ring as a metaphor for sin, even though he said it's not an allegory, it's kind of an allegory.
But even in that sense, like, Abel wasn't wanting to sin, but still that, like, Smeagol killing his brother because of the sin. Yeah, I like it. The thing I wanted to point out is in chapter 15, then the Lord put a mark on Cain to warn anyone who might try to kill him. No, he did not become a black person because of that. That's ridiculous. That's dumb. That's stupid.
Mormons.
Because God,
racist.
Number one, God puts this curse on Cain, not his lineage. And while you could argue that, like, well, yes, but sins of the father are a thing. Yes, but sins of the father can be forgiven.
But you even see the sins of the father, because I remember or at least from my notes, one of his descendants is a murderer as well. Yeah.
But no, he did not become a black guy. Black people happen because we all have melanin in our skin, and depends on the amount of melanin we have as our skin tone. When you spend hundreds of years in Africa under the heat of the sun and your body tans, your body begins to produce more melanin, and your children are born with a higher, I want to say dosage.
They're born with their genes.
Yeah. They're born with more melanin in their body, which means their skin is darker. You can look at that in evidence of kids who are mixed, because if there's a black and a white, the melanin levels are mixed, and so their skin is not as dark. And as you progress down, their skin gets lighter and lighter.
Also, like,
and
mixed
the
people
opposite
are, like,
happens too.
really, like, they're either, like, super duper handsome or, like, really pretty. Like,
I know a mixed man by the name, I won't say his name. We traveled with him, though. And that's a hot man.
He is a hot man.
If you are watching this,
I'm not gay,
this will
but
probably
he is
make
a hot
you.
man.
This will probably make you feel a little uncomfortable that I'm saying this, but you are hot, and I am only a little bit jealous of your girlfriend. Anyway, I'm kidding.
So gay.
No, hey, no, but it's true. I get what you're saying. Mixed people are pretty attractive for some reason.
But yes,
and also,
the
like,
mark is not blackness. The mark is not blackness.
It is okay to be black. We're not racist.
Anyway,
another thing I find interesting about that is that God didn't immediately, like, kill Cain. He let him continue his life and even put a mark on him so that other people didn't kill him.
To add on to that, he's like,
God's mercy.
Why would you make me homeless? Because anyone who finds me is going to kill me. And God's like, all right, anyone who kills you, I'll curse them worse than I'm cursing you.
Yeah.
Which I think is a lot.
God is merciful.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And patient. Clear distinction. God is patient. He is not tolerant.
Yeah.
If God was tolerant, he would let us all into heaven without having to have some.
He would have been like, "Oh, you killed your brother."
Well, I think tolerance comes down to a definition. If you lost the definition of what tolerance means.
That's true. Tolerance used to be.
But in the proper context and the proper use of the words tolerance and patience, those are not synonyms. God is patient. He is not tolerant. God does not tolerate sin. He is patient with our sin and waits for us to turn from it.
Yeah.
And
Hello.
We ate dinner.
We did eat dinner.
That's why things are different.
Yeah. Mainly just our drinks.
Yeah, mainly.
I have a little bit more energy because we ate some pizza.
Yeah. All right. And Cain talked with Abel, his brother. This is verse 8. And it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and slew him. The point that the thing that I would like to point out here, he waited until they were in the field, and it's kind of implied by themselves, so their parents weren't around, so they couldn't see. Again, with the hiding of sin.
Yeah. Which is a constant.
It shows that he premeditated it, which makes it murder. It's not in the spur of the moment thing.
Yeah, he premeditated.
Well, I mean, even in a spur of the moment thing,
it would still be murder. But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It was still no one can see, so I think I can get away with it.
Yeah.
And then God literally talks about
bro, I saw you.
in verse 10, what hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground.
Yeah.
Like when innocent blood is shed, the ground cries out to God.
The very earth cries out.
Yeah.
Because this was the first murder. He's like, the earth was like, what the crap is this? A man just killed a man.
Not saying that earth is an animate object, but like this. Yeah.
But
The blood cries out.
It's like it's a poetic thing.
Yeah.
Well, also it's a realistic thing because there's probably a reason that our economy is so bad with the number of innocent children we murder in the womb every year. I wonder if those two things are correlated.
Possibly. It might be. We don't know.
Maybe. It's almost like the Bible talks about he judges.
I don't know how to explain it if it is.
We definitely think it is.
Yeah,
I don't know how to describe
it.
it.
It's 1000% that. Something about hiding sin.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a very common thing where people often like, oh, well, I can hide my sin, and so if nobody else knows about it, I can get away with it.
Oh, excuse me.
Wow.
Not water, bro.
Yeah, that's like every human can relate to that. Is having to hide this sin. And it's funny because guess what happens? Quote the Bible: sin finds you out. Your sin gets, and that might not be, absolutely everybody finding it out.
Yeah, it might not be public, but God knows.
God knows, and God will let you know that He knows. So.
And also, like on the topic of sin, it's verse 6. I know we kind of went over that, but he's talking about, Lord's not verse 6, 7. Like if thou dost well, shalt thou not be accepted? And if thou dost not well, sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. Like when you're not doing your best, you're inevitably going to wind up falling into sin because you're going to want more than the results of what you're getting because you're not doing your best. And then you try and hide it, or you think because it's already hidden and you can already do it without other people seeing it, then you're going to desire to sin and you're going to think you can get away with it.
I mean, that's what happens with like addiction when it my mind immediately goes to pornography. But yeah, the longer you go without getting found out, the more you fall into it because you're getting away with it until eventually it just gets so bad that when someone does find out, it's really bad, especially when it's your wife and she's upset with you. Yeah, it's the story that every Christian can relate to, hiding your sin that way.
Well, that's the way, like with my pornography, I eventually told my wife, so I stopped doing that. Well, I stopped doing it before I told my wife, but anyways, it still had to come out because of the way I knew and I knew God knew. And then excuse me, I've been sleeping with my ex-girlfriend. And I thought I was keeping it a secret. My parents already knew. I just didn't know that they knew. But I thought I was hiding it. But even though I thought I was hiding it, outside I thought I was getting away with it. Inside I knew God knew about it. And so I eventually wound up like confessing my sins so that way I wouldn't do it again with another girlfriend. So like I had accountability there.
Yeah.
Like
Hiding it doesn't work.
No,
Lesson
sir.
learned.
the best disinfectant is sunlight. It's almost like that's why God calls us to be the salt and light of the earth, because salt kills and dehydrates bacteria, and light burns it away and promotes healing.
Based.
Amen, brother.
Amen.
The other thing I want to talk about is relating to Abel. Because people will use like, oh, if God is good, then why did Abel die? Why did someone who was doing something good for God die? Well, I think a simple answer is God was ready to reward his servant.
Also, God's not going to take away the free will of Cain to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had, when Drew and I were traveling over the summer in 2020, we had devotions that, I don't remember exactly what the topic was. It was something along the lines of, like, what's one instance in the Bible where you can see God doing something for good? Which is, like, a generic thing, but I think everyone had something that was, like, no one really thought about off the top of their head. One of the guys in our group brought up Abel as God being able to use Cain's sin to reward Abel for the sacrifice. Like, because Abel was making the correct sacrifices, was giving God the best of what he had. And through his death, God is able to reward him in heaven. And I love that so much, and my heart tugged onto it for some reason. And then a couple months after the summer, in November, my dad passed away, and I was really struggling on where the good could come from this. And the thing that kept replaying back in my mind was this kid saying this again, is that God was using it to reward his servant. And thinking about all the changes my dad had made and ways he was serving God and stuff, that helped me a lot with dealing with that, with losing my father like that, is keeping in mind that, yeah, I don't have him on earth anymore. I will see him again one day, but God is rewarding him for everything that he has done on this earth. And yeah. It's just, I really like looking at it that way.
It's a very comforting way to look at it.
Yeah. It's like, it's the first sin, it's horrible, but
God can still use it for good.
God uses everything bad for good.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we just, as people, need to, I guess, keep that in mind. That God uses everything bad for good. Whether that may be a small thing, whether it be a big thing, we have to constantly keep a third eye, constantly keep a diligence about looking for God in those situations. So. But yeah, keeping in mind as Christians, I was just going to reiterate again, keeping in mind as Christians of looking where God is using the bad for good. Because God doesn't want bad things for us. God wants what is good for us.
Well, and even in this instance, like, God was merciful to the murder.
Yeah.
God wants what is good for us. When something bad to us happens, that's, I guess, in a sense, outside of his control. Not really, because he can stop it if he wants to, but outside of his control in the context of our free will. Like, God,
he could literally at any point, like, slap you dead, but, like, he lets you do it because he gave us free will, and he's not going to go back on his word.
Which is such a beautiful thing to look at, is how much God limits himself to allow our free will.
Oh, speaking of, I got. It's not even just limits himself. Hold up. I found a meme earlier today.
Cue
That
the
is
Alex
relevant.
Jones clip.
I got a meme. Wasn't I gonna be here? I'm gonna find it. Hold on just a second.
Hey, memes can bring some true wisdom. All right?
They do, honestly. Memes are great, especially like Christian memes.
Mm-hmm.
There's some deep themes in Christian memes.
Yeah, I wonder what is kind of going through Adam and Eve's head as this is happening.
He's like, oh crap, our sons killed each other.
Like,
our son killed our
Cain
other
comes
son.
back and goes, Abel's dead. What if it was an accident?
Mm.
Like, he didn't mean to kill him, just hurt him?
He had to have mean it.
I mean,
kill him.
He probably did.
I guess.
But maybe he didn't. I don't know.
Okay,
Maybe that's why God was more merciful. I don't know.
Could be. But, like, thinking it too, like, I like in Cain's mind, like I was just angry. I was upset. I didn't mean to end his life, and God's like, this is what your sin gets you.
Yeah.
That'd be really interesting to think
That
about.
that is interesting to think
I
about.
feel like it's something he had to have knowingly done because God warned him ahead of time.
That's true. It's curious to think about.
Maybe
like,
it didn't
if
start out that
Abel,
way.
if
like,
Abel is the first death, because I don't know if it really says. It probably does when we get to reading the genealogies exactly how old Cain and Abel were when this happened.
you'd have to think they were pretty young to
Yeah.
act on emotions like this.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have been older.
I mean, but how old was Hitler?
I mean, honestly, he wasn't that old.
No, he wasn't that old.
So the thing that we were talking about free will. It's not even just like God's like, oh, I'm gonna let you live and still exist.
Mhm.
It's so this person posted, deism says God made us, but he has become disinterested in our existence, like an inventor leaving his invention. This is false because God must perpetually will everything into existence. Why are you letting your hair?
I'm trying to grab my dog's toy.
Okay. God must perpetually will everything into existence, or everything would cease to exist. This means you and I are perpetually willed into existence by God, meaning God thinks about us constantly and never ceases to think about us, lest we were to cease existing. God being infinitely perfect means that he has no need for us, so he wills us into existence purely out of a desire for us to be with him. This means that God both never stops thinking about you, and that the sole reason he continues to think about you is solely because he loves you.
Aww.
So all God had
I'm
to
sorry.
do. Okay, but think about it. Like
No, but
at
that's
this instance,
beautiful.
all
It's
that God
like-
had to do was just stop thinking about Cain.
Yeah.
All he had to do, he didn't even. It wasn't even like he had to go out of his way to kill Cain. All he had to do was stop thinking about him.
I think a lot of times people forget God's omnipresence.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, when we were talking about before, like, oh, God doesn't want to be close to me. Like, no, you're not allowing God to be close to you. Because God is so personal with you that he is with you.
Yeah.
At the same time, he's fully with Nathan, fully with Drew, fully with me, fully with whoever's watching and stuff.
Like the Bible says,
Yeah.
when he made man, he breathed his breath into him.
Yeah.
Every time you draw breath, it's God thinking about you. You drawing breath.
Yeah.
No, I just think it's
I
interesting.
just choked on the water.
Like a lot of people think like, oh, God would have had to gone out of his way to kill. You know, when you think about God punishing someone, like God could just be like, I don't have to really do anything to destroy you. I just have to stop willing you into existence.
You would just.
It's no longer my will that you exist. Just and you're gone out of any eternity in either direction. Which obviously he sent because he created us in his own image. We have like we either die eternally or we live with Christ eternally. Like we have physical limitations. Like we have a beginning and an end.
Mm-hmm.
But
All right. I think if we're done, we can go ahead and move on to the next sections.
oh, talking about the curse too.
Hmm.
We didn't cover the curse.
Sure.
Talking about how now when he tills the ground, it's not gonna yield any fruit.
Which is already it's already hard to till the ground and yield the fruit. The curse is he's placed on Adam, and now he's telling Cain like, you will never get it.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that's why there's some regions of the world that wind up desert.
That's interesting.
That would be interesting.
Maybe he was trying to kill her.
I mean,
Because I feel like there's sections of the like someone can correct me if I'm wrong. Like I feel like there's sections of the world that's like this patch of desert in the middle of a big area.
there are
of-
spots like that where it's oddly
It's
like
the
nothing just can't grow.
It's like the opposite of an oasis.
Yeah.
Like where an oasis is in a desert, stuff can grow. It's like I don't know what that would
Which I mean, like scientifically, that's because of the way the soil is. But there's nothing to say that the soil wasn't touched by Cain.
And also, it's almost like God uses the rules of his own creation to act out his will within his creation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He made science.
That's why that's why science and the Bible can coexist. It's just you have to make sure the Bible comes first before you're.
Also,
Your
modern
science.
science was invented by the church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's why we don't just go.
Galileo, Christian.
That's also why we don't just go. Thunderstorm.
It's actually
It was
persecuted.
Thor.
It was Thor.
I think it was Galileo was actually persecuted by the church because his wild beliefs. He didn't have enough proof to back them up. on some things, which is hilarious to think about. It was like Galileo was Christian. And then he was like, I think we revolve around the sun. I'm like, nah, bro, you're wild.
See, the sun is over there now. We didn't move. The sun moved.
No. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Ready to continue?
Yeah.
All right. To finish out the rest of chapter 4 was 17 through 26. Cain had sexual...
Wait, are we going to talk about Cain trying to barter with God? Being like, yo, this is too...
If you want.
Hey, there's a lot of stuff to unpack.
There is.
So like Cain said unto the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid, and I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth. And it shall come to pass that everyone that findeth me shall slay me. And 15, and the Lord said unto him, therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. So, like, he's bartering with God of, like, my punishment is too big. And God was like, even in this instance, like, shows mercy of, like, I won't let people kill you. You still have all the same punishment, but I won't let them kill you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting that there's like a double, like it's both merciful. How do you feel about? Okay, what do you think about it being like? You have this mark, so no one can kill you, so you don't get away with it. You still have to deal with the curse, so you can't just go find somebody and then have them kill you.
Yeah.
It's true.
But you have to think.
But then also,
it is also an act of mercy, though, because I don't think Cain wanted to die. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought it up. He would have been just like,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it could be part of the. I mean, obviously, the mark of Cain. People would probably word would probably travel what that meant and what he did. So you would still have the shame of what he did.
Well, when I was reading chapter 5, someone mentions the mark of Cain, and one of Cain's descendants mentions the mark of Cain and tries to place this mark, like this claim on himself, where God was the only person that was able to put the claim on Cain.
Yeah, so I'm 17 and 26, finishing out the chapter 4. Cain had sexual relations with his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Enoch. Then Cain founded a city, which he named Enoch after his son. Enoch had a son named Irid. Irid became the father of Mehujael. Mehujael became the father of Methuselah. Methuselah became the father of Lamech. Lamech married 2 women. The first was named Ada. The second was Zillah. Ada gave birth to Jabal, who was the first of those who raise livestock and live in tents. His brother's name was Jubal, the first of all who play the harp and flute. Lamech's other wife, Zillah, gave birth to a son named Tubal-Cain. He became an expert in forging tools of bronze and iron. Tubal-Cain had a sister named Naamah. One day Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. Listen to me, you wives of Lamech. I have killed a man who attacked me, and a young man who wounded me. If someone who kills Cain is punished 7 times, then the one who kills me will be punished 77 times. And I'll finish, Adam had sexual relations with his wife again, and she gave birth to another son, who she named Seth. For she said, God has granted me another son in the place of Abel, whom Cain killed. When Seth grew up, he had a son he named Enosh. At that time, people first began to worship the Lord by name. I like that. We'll get to it. We'll start with the Cain. So, first thing I want to point out, Cain had sexual relations with his wife. Who was his wife?
His sister.
It was his sister. It had to have been. We talked about it a little bit in the Fall of Man, but if we have the argument of God made more people than just Adam, then original sin can't be a thing.
Yep.
If that's the case, then there would have to be people out there who are sinless. Well, you could make the argument, well, they also sinned against God in some way, but I really feel like
If it
it
was
wouldn't
their
be
own,
the same significance because of the way that Christ represents Adam and how much the prophecies correlate the two together.
also
So,
then Christ covering wouldn't qualify for them because he came out of Adam's line.
right, it
It
would
was to
only have
restore
been
Adam's
for Adam.
line.
Yeah, so we have to. It's tough. It's a rough one to accept that Adam or that Adam and Eve's kids became each other's wives. But when you look at it, I want to look at it from a couple different perspectives. So first, genetically, Adam and Eve were created as good and perfect, as God had made them to be, which means their genes would have been perfect.
Yeah.
And we even see this throughout history in different ways. As incest gets closer to our time, more defects start happening. And so it's completely plausible, and even evolutionists will back this up, that a brother and sister marrying from almost 7,000 years ago, their children would probably have no defects because their genes would have been so pure. Which is interesting because, like, if that weren't the case, if there were multiple families with perfect genes, humans would have far less genetic problems than we do.
Yeah.
Because those purities would have stayed for longer because it would have a bigger gene pool.
Maybe some of us wouldn't be acoustic.
On the topic of like where it's with like the incest stuff, it's like your only option. So your only option was this one person.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like you have all these other options. You better not pick them.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like looking at a lot of the different stuff in the Bible, like when it comes to polygamy in the Bible too.
Well, the Bible has always been against polygamy. And
Right.
there's people who did it and practiced it,
Mhm.
who were even followers of God, but it's still recognized as a sin, recognized as adultery. Like King Solomon, his sin was lust. He had, 500 wives and concubines?
700 wives and concubines.
I thought it was 5.
I think 500 wives, 300 concubines.
Okay, so then
Total of 700.
No, 500 and 300 is 800.
You're right. I'm dumb.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting because there's points where God commands someone to marry someone else. I want to say Abraham, but I might be wrong. I know it's at least in his story in some sense. God commands I was curious, and so I did a little bit of researching on this before, where he commands someone to marry another person, like to take them in. And marrying back then was not solely like to become his wife. You'd marry like a widow, and in that way take her under your wing and take care of her, pay for her, feed her, shelter her, stuff like that.
It was a way to take care of women.
Yeah,
because the Bible's not misogynistic.
It's like talking about your brother's wife or something like that.
Something like that.
Yep.
And the way the guy that I pointed out is like the Bible, it like doesn't really directly condemn polygamy, and then in some cases it like when it comes to adultery, and the way we would see that modern day would be polygamy. But the Bible constantly gives us
New Testament it does. It's talking about one because the Bible all throughout says a marriage is between one man and one woman.
Right. But constantly throughout the Old Testament, every occurrence of polygamy happening it does not end good.
Yeah.
It always ends in a bad way. And so I kind of look at that when it is saying it comes to I don't know. I can see the arguments for it to be a sin. My main thing is with God doesn't change when it comes to what is a sin, what isn't a sin. And that could be a conversation we can have a little bit later as
with a more qualified person.
Yeah,
with we're getting to the point where we're over our heads for this one.
Yeah.
We're not historians.
And so I think looking at it from the context of look at the outcomes it gives as a way to decide whether not is it a sin or not, but as Christians should we do it? So the sense of incest, like what you were saying with you will
mess up your kids.
Yeah. As a good Christian, you wouldn't want to mess up your kids, so you wouldn't do that. When it comes to polygamy, you want to love on your wife, and if you were to get a second wife, you would just breed jealousy, and that would, obviously cause some strife in some areas.
Well, and also the Bible says one man, one woman.
Yeah.
That it does that because the Bible has prescribed marriage So there's prescriptive text and there's descriptive text. Descriptive text is saying what something was or is. Prescriptive text is where it's saying how something is to be. It refers to like marriage being man and one man and one wife. It's a prescriptive text. This is how God requires things to be. Because if you look in I believe it's 2 Timothy where he's talking about the qualifications to be a pastor. This is a husband of one wife. His house is in good order.
Yeah. No, I mean even we won't get into that at all. The conversation is starting that will be for a different episode with people.
We kind of went on a tangent
a little bit and some other stuff, but
we should get back to the actual thing we're reading.
Yeah. So.
I mean, everything in here cross-references with the rest of it.
That's true.
That's true.
So,
I don't know if we're...
I don't want to get into it quite yet. I want to wait till we have like a qualified people on to talk about stuff like that.
Because they're complicated.
Yeah. I don't really know what the significance is there, and we can ask someone later and have an episode about it where Lamech trying to put the punishment of Cain on himself. It's like his way of getting away with killing him. It's like, I've killed someone, so now if someone kills me, they'll be punished even more than Cain. It's true. But
the thought that I had...
It's interesting, because he says he killed someone after they attacked him, so technically it would have been self-defense and murder then. So, I was
I don't know.
Curious.
It's interesting. I would like to talk to someone about it first and see what they think.
Part of me is like...
Someone
because he had to... Because Cain was the original founder of this region.
Right.
So this family lineage would have to, at least like the core of the family lineage, would have to be the leaders of that region. So maybe it's talking about something. Maybe it's like a early kind of showing of how like violence begats violence and how like wars start.
Yeah.
This is pure speculation. I don't know.
That'd be interesting.
This is an area. So we all know like the fallen man and stuff pretty well. We're getting into the areas of the Bible. That's the reason why we're doing the podcast.
We don't know that much
where we don't know that much about, and so that's why we're gonna have guests on to come back on stuff that we didn't understand very well. We're gonna have. That's why we're gonna have like episodes like Ask a Pastor, like what we did with Jake.
Yeah. So moving on to the next part with the birth of Seth, just kind of that replacement of Abel in a way. God's mercy and giving them a new son to continue that, lineage, but like that, because obviously Adam and Eve had more than just the three boys.
I think it just mentions probably the three firstborn sons. There were probably a lot of girls.
Probably. Man's lived 930 years old. I don't know about you, but if I live to be 930 years old, I think by default, me and my wife had a lot of kids. Especially if,
your genes were nearly perfect.
Exactly. So, taking, a normal human's 80-year lifespan, stretching that to reach 930, starting as an adult. Had a lot of kids. I wonder, when Adam died, what age was his youngest kid?
I don't know, but there was some guy. So that's off topic. Never mind.
It
has to do with some guy from the Revolutionary War who was super old, and dude so he thought he was gonna die, and he was when he was in his 80s or 90s because he got stabbed and beat to death.
That works. I'm still in the middle. We got even spacing.
So.
Sorry.
So this guy, he got stabbed / beat to death. Well, fun fact, he didn't actually die, even though he was super old. He's like the original get off my lawn guy.
I'm kidding.
The British tried to kill him, and then the doctor was like, I don't know how I'm going to tell 173 living descendants. Hey, your grandpa's going to die in the other room.
Get there. So, this is the written account of the descendants of Adam. When God created human beings, he made them to be like himself. He created them male and female, and he blessed them and called them human. When Adam was 130 years old, he became the father of his son, who was just like him in his very image. He named his son Seth, and after the birth of Seth, Adam lived another 800 years. And he had other sons and daughters. Adam lived 930 years when he died. I read this to someone one time, as I was reading through this, I was doing a little bit of my own research, and he asked me how I can be okay with them being so old. Like, does it make sense? And I was like, yeah, it doesn't make sense because we have imperfect genes. And I was like, you have perfect genes, you're fine. He's like, what about the Middle Ages? You only live to be like 50. And I'm like, okay, but count on your fingers the amount of things that would kill you in the Middle Ages. Oh, you can't? That's right. Stepping out on your front porch could make you die.
Step out on your front porch, accidentally cuts foot on rock. Well, I guess you're gonna die of what's it called?
Infection.
Gangrene.
Yeah.
You now have gangrene. Tuberculosis. You're dead now.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, tuberculosis has been such a problem. I was listening to a thing where it was talking about tuberculosis is such a problem that way back in history we find skeletons that it still when we find the skeletal remains of people from ancient history.
Mm-hmm.
It's the damage to the person and their skeletal structure is so bad that it shows up and we can tell that someone had tuberculosis from back then.
Wow.
Because it messes up your body so bad.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And we have modern medicine to alleviate some of it.
I imagine, as humanity went on, we lived for a long time because our genes were so perfect. But then you just start, rapidly deteriorating, faster than we can come up with solutions to the results of our deteriorating genes.
Yeah.
Because,
and then someone was
we developed pretty fast. Direct descendants of Adam and Eve were coming up with, or actually, it said Cain. But direct descendants of Cain were coming up with the bronze and iron tools already and weapons and stuff. Yeah. And but we live much longer, and then as we start dying off faster and faster, we have less time to figure things out, and we don't progress as fast.
You have 900. You have 930 years to have kids and invent. Mm-hmm. You're gonna do quite a bit.
And then all of a sudden, dudes are dying at 100, and you're like, oh crap, we have a lot less time to actually do stuff. And then friggin' Middle Ages, they're dying at 50. You're like, oh crap, what are we doing?
Well, and also when people started dying, you also had those idiots who were like, quickly, what do we do? I don't know, burn the babies in a statue of a bull's hands.
Yeah. This guy has the Black Plague. I don't know, we'll put some leeches on him or something. Maybe we'll suck him out.
If I'm doing my math right, if every 46 years Adam had 4 kids, he would have 184 kids by the time he died.
That's a lot of kids.
That's a lot of kids. So that's fast growing, bro. It's a secret song from Zelda. You find secrets, it plays that little jingle.
Your little jingle.
The thing that I wanted to bring up,
I feel like that's probably a racial slur somewhere.
Probably.
The thing I wanted to bring up too is Adam's age. I just love this so much. So if we put Cain and Abel at about 20 years old when Cain kills Abel, and we put Seth being born almost directly after that.
Well, they could have been younger than that. They could have been 14 or 15 because
they could have
were adulthood.
But just for the context of the time, we'll say 20 years old. 20 years, and then within the next 5 years, Seth is born. So that's take away 25 years from your 130, you're left with 105 years. If we put Cain and Abel being born, or at least conceived, directly after leaving the garden, which I would say as a man, if I found out that I could have sex with my wife and that'd be that great, that's happening immediately. So we're saying, let's say that
have sex in the garden?
it never brings it up.
I mean, I'm sure
it doesn't say they have sexual relations until after they leave the garden. Yeah, it's completely quiet about it until after. Yeah, until
so God gave them the command to multiply before that.
I don't think he did. I think just to cultivate.
Sure
the command to multiply doesn't come until Noah, I don't think. You can double check it while I finish this. See. If it is, it's going to be in chapter 2, from verses 4 through the end, because after that it's just talking about sin. So if we put that there, it's likely that Adam and Eve spent roughly 100 years in the garden, which is wild to think about.
Yeah.
So for the fact that humans could go 100 years without sinning.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think of how old these people were. It does?
It's in chapter 1.
Oh.
So God created man. Chapter 1, verse 27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. All right. Reiterating that, verse 5, chapter 2, chapter 5, verse 2, brain. And then
but it doesn't say about
28.
populating the earth.
And God blessed them and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish in the sea and over the fowl. Chapter 1, verse 28.
Oh, you said 5.
No, I was talking about the verse 27.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Verse 27 is
Okay.
a cross-reference with chapter 5, verse 2.
Okay. Maybe. I mean, it doesn't. I don't know if they would.
They probably did, but didn't have kids or something.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, the Bible talks about it after they left the garden, so that's what everybody assumes. It's possible they could have been born in the garden, which I don't really like the idea of that.
I don't feel like that fits.
Because if looking at it from original sin standpoint, Adam gives birth to Cain and Abel, they would be sinless.
Yeah.
And then Adam sins. How do Cain and Abel gain sin? Mm-hmm. Are they also sinless, or is that a family fruit they pass around for everyone? It's interesting to think about. I mean, we don't know for sure. We'll never know the answer until the day we die. But
yeah,
it was probably they probably did, but also I don't know.
Maybe Eve was pregnant when she ate the fruit.
No, it probably wasn't that. It was probably.
I don't think that Cain and Abel would have been born until after the. After
it was
the garden
probably
for the sole reason of the
fairly.
sin.
It would have had to been fairly quickly after Adam and Eve got the command to be fruitful and multiply, that they ate of the fruit.
I would say probably it's probably
Yeah, which like if that's the case, like that's like almost 100 years. That's solely saying that Adam and Cain or Cain and Abel were 20 years old. If they were a lot older, like 40s, that lowers it a little bit. But
honestly,
it's still a while.
If you live to like however old they live to be, super long, is 40 really that many years?
It's true.
40 might have been like 20 for them.
I mean,
they would have. When it comes to our time, it would have been the same amount of time, but their like mental process of it.
This is going to be our longest episode, guys.
Probably. We're doing a lot of rambling. We'll see what happens when I cut stuff. So yeah, skipping through the genealogies, just because they're really boring, and we'll get back to them when we do genealogies after the Tower of Babel. Finishing up with today, we're going to read chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. Then the people began to multiply on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God, who saw the beautiful woman, and took any they wanted as their wives. Then the Lord said, My spirit will not put up with humans for such a long time. They are only mortal flesh. In the future, normal lifespan will be no more than 120 years. In those days, and for some time after, giant Nephilites lived on the earth. For whenever the sons of God had intercourse with women, they gave birth to children who became the heroes and famous warriors of ancient times. The Lord observed the extent of human wickedness on the earth, and he saw that everything they thought or imagined was consistently and totally evil. So the Lord was sorry he had ever made them and put them on the earth. It broke his heart, and the Lord said, I will wipe this human race I have created from the face of the earth. Yes, and I will destroy every living thing, all the people, the large animals, and small animals that scurry along the ground, and even the birds of the sky. I am sorry I ever made them. But Noah found favor with the Lord. And then we'll read the story of Noah next week. It's interesting when looking at like the giant Nephilites, and they began to give birth to children who became the hero. Can you not slam it on the table every time? Interesting thing about, I heard a theory one time that like mythologies come from this.
From the Nephilim? I was going to say the same thing. Yep.
Which is, I believe that to an extent, not fully, because there's like when you come to Native American mythologies and Aztec and Incan mythologies, those come so much later. Like they didn't.
But like, people. You gotta think the Norse were probably descendants of people from the Tower of Babel, who probably got stories from Noah's and his family that were from before the time of the flood. Stories of Thor and Odin, all that could have come from Nephilim.
Yeah, well, and also,
it's possible. I don't know if I would caveat saying.
I wouldn't say it's like that's absolutely true.
There's also probably Nephilim after that because it says whenever.
So I really don't like believing that the Nephilim still exist, especially when God says that he wipes out everything from pre-flood.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, that probably would have been unclean. So.
My thought is like if it happened. there are some translations that say whenever, and some that say when.
Yeah.
And also there is evidence of like actual literal giants. Like I was listening to an archaeology thing where this guy was talking about how there was this like Native American tribe who had artwork of like these giants and these French people on this one specific island. And this was like during colonial years where people were starting to come over here to the United States, like just around the same time with like Christopher Columbus. And you had people, these French people didn't believe these Native Americans. They were told like, don't go to that island, like there's giants there.
Yeah.
They went to that island and then came back horrified. So the Native Americans have artwork of the French being horrified. The French have artwork of them going and seeing something completely unnatural on this island and being horrified. And then later they found giant skeletons on the island. And then also in like this is me believing it for fun because it sounds fun. Not that I think Nephilim are fun or anything, but I think the concept of it
tickles your nerd brain.
It makes my nerd brain happy. It makes my nerd brain and my lore brain happy. So, like, that was horrifying.
That was my wife.
Oh,
Oh crap. I just sent her money for sushi.
So, I think it was like in 2013, there was this story that was going like that the government apparently the government tried to cover it up, where there was special forces guys over in the Middle East. I forget which mountains it was in, but they came across a giant in a cave, and like they had been told by the locals, like, hey, don't go up there. There's a giant up there. Like there's giants in those caves, and they're like, no, we don't believe you. Like you're crazy. Like, no, there's really giants up there. They go up there, and a bunch of special forces guys actually wound up killing one of these giants, but not until after it had severely wounded some of them, and I think it even killed one or two of the guys in the squad.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I
don't know.
I think there's other things to explain it. I really do not like the idea of stuff pre-flood still existing today.
I mean,
because of how much of an emphasis God is.
Gonna talk about the people who think pigs are part human.
No, we'll do that. I want to do like an episode where we just do review insane internet Christians. I don't know.
I would like to disclaim my theory is just a theory for fun. I tend to like this more because it makes my nerd brain more happy. Yeah. And like, it could be either way. I'm not dead set on either direction. I just think the theories on it are interesting. And
it is an interesting theory.
I think the other archaeological evidence for giants, like specifically Nephilim, still existing after the flood, but on a much rarer instance because it's much less acceptable after the flood. Like, I don't know. I think it's interesting. I'm not like, oh my gosh, I hope it's real. Like, I actually hope it's not.
Yeah, that'd be terrible.
I just think it's interesting.
It's interesting to look at, but like, I don't know. For me, I just don't want to believe that because of the emphasis that the Bible puts on God wiping out that world. Like, that world is gone, it is done, it will never happen again. Yes, we'll get that bad again, but it'll be on a different scale than how it was before.
Yeah,
so
he
talks about limiting our lifespan in that passage, right?
Yeah. He talks about
So
living to 120 years old. There's not a single person on Earth that has lived past 120.
Yeah.
20.
But yeah, it's just, for me, it's like, when it comes to the Nephilim, I don't know.
I just had a brain.
I mean, I believe the Nephilim existed. I don't think that it has happened since the flood or since pre-flood because of the emphasis God.
How bad the pre-flood world was.
Yeah, in destroying everything. And then when looking at it from the perspective of some of the stuff in the Book of Enoch too, the stuff it kind of adds to that pre-flood world is just
you gotta
so
think they
much
lived for
worse.
so long they could get up to a lot worse than we can with the amount of years they have.
Yeah. They have more time.
You think we're bad?
They have more time to get bored of whatever degenerate stuff they're doing to find more other even worse degenerate stuff to do.
Yeah. Imagine all the generators today living to 950.
Well, they usually don't because they get grids, which is what the original name for AIDS was. It was gay-related immunodeficiency syndrome. It didn't used to be autoimmune. It didn't used to be AIDS. It was GRIDS. But we changed it to be politically correct, even though really the only people who get it are gay or heroin addicts.
Anyway, spicy.
I don't know. It's I think the emphasis that we need to focus on though is how bad the pre-flood world is. When you look at every instance of God destroying city or a people, it's because there's no one that's left that is redeemable. Not that people can become unredeemable. It come to the point where people are so like deep in their sin. God knows what is going to happen.
Well, and also,
God knows what choices we're going to make, whether we're going to follow Him or not. Yes, it is we still have our free will because we get to just choose those, but God knows what's going to happen. And I fully believe that God looks at the pre-flood world and goes, Noah is the only one that will turn to me, no matter what I do for the rest of this world. And that's the only time God wipes out, is when there is absolutely no hope from people. Not because He's not giving them hope, because they won't let God.
They will never turn to Him.
They'll turn to God and they won't let that hope be there.
Well, and notice God's wrath always has, with the story of Noah, it always has an arc. He always makes a way.
Yeah.
He always makes a way for redemption. And then the people who are that wicked, it's not that He's like, oh, they're unredeemable. There is a certain point, the Bible talks about multiple times, the Bible says He gave them up to their desires. God gave them up to their desires. This, and like multiple times, particularly talking about like the sexual, like deviant sexual stuff. He's talking about like there's a certain point where God's like, you're on your own. I'm not gonna keep chasing. Like that's what the Bible talks about. God hardened Pharaoh's heart because he, like, with all of the different plagues, it was God proving that the pantheon that Pharaoh worshipped was not that strong, and proving to Pharaoh that he was not this like God king. And Pharaoh still refused, and God was like, okay, your heart is hardened, and you cannot, like, I've tried everything to get you to let my people go of your own free will. Now you get my wrath.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it happens every single time there's a kind of deliverance in that way, or a destruction in that way, where there's always a way out. There's always someone that comes and delivers that, whether Sodom and Gomorrah be the angels, Nineveh with Jonah, when Noah comes with the ark. There's always that way out for people, and it's only when we can see that like there's no hope for the people because they won't allow God to be the hope. God has given us free will, and God doesn't abuse that free will by forcing Himself on us. He allows us to choose to be with Him or not.
He lets us choose destruction if that's all we want.
Yeah.
Which we chose destruction in the garden. We still choose, and everybody chooses destruction every day.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
When people are like, oh, why does God, if God's so perfect, why does He allow bad things to happen? Or why did He make a world with suffering? God didn't make a world with suffering. We chose suffering. We rebelled against His perfect world. God made a perfect world without suffering, and we chose to rebel against it. We choose every day to rebel against it. And then obviously, if you're a Christian, you're no longer like your flesh still tries to rebel. Like your sin, like mankind has sinful nature, but now you're bringing yourself into alignment with God's perfect will.
Yeah,
like talks about it,
which is sad, but true.
I love verse 5. The Lord observed the extent of human wickedness on the earth, and He saw that everything they thought or imagined was consistently and totally evil.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah. It just reiterates again like how broken pre-flood world is.
Well, and it's also, if you look, and if you're looking at it from the Sethite theory of the Nephilim, it's talking about, and the son, the sons of God came into the daughters of man, like. From the Sethite theory is that it was just Seth's descendants versus Cain's descendants being super degenerate, and Seth's descendants being very like following God, like they were followers of God. Where if you're unequally yoked, it breeds more wickedness because
it's easier to pull someone down from a ladder than to climb them up with you.
Well, and not even that. What's gonna be worse if I
buddy.
Sorry. If I know I'm doing wrong, and just go like, if I know I'm doing wrong and just don't care, or if I know there's this part of me that knows that there's a God out there, but I want to do wrong. So now, because there's the two different cultures coming together, instead of one shifting over and repenting and turning to Christ because God is, instead of one, now you're getting this weird blending where it justifies sin using cheap grace.
Yeah.
He stole Jaeger from me.
I did. My feet. I went to pick him up, but he'll pee on me.
So you have like in the Germany in the 1930s, you had people coming into the church blending Nazi ideology with Christian ideology and twisting that Christian ideology to brew more hatred towards the Jews. So when you blend the two and you taint the gospel, the pure whole gospel is untainted. Like, you can't corrupt it. But when you pick and choose parts of the gospel, because
when you corrupt it,
when you create a corrupt and false image of it, then it creates. I'm reading probably into this way too much, but
I think it's like
it's interesting.
Both ideas lead to the same result. Is that the world just becomes so utterly broken that every thought and imagination they have is consistently and totally evil.
Yeah.
Both those things, like, left unchecked, left without God's presence to be that, like, still small voice in our hearts, leads to that.
Which gives me hope for today, because we're not quite that bad yet. There is still good in people. Like, you hear people even from like LGBTQ areas where they feel something.
Yeah.
Obviously, because they wouldn't feel the need to, like, I don't have the words to say what I'm trying to say right now, but there are parts of, even in the most sinful areas of life nowadays, that feel like something is wrong, that they're not quite where they're supposed to be. There is still hope for us today, and there are still good people, even people who aren't Christians, who still hold to, like, Christian values and convictions that are just waiting to be reached. And there's a lot of good Christians still in the world. It's not like there's just one family of Noah that's the only actual Christians.
Yeah. I believe Gandalf, one of my favorite theologians. It's Frodo says, all this evil stuff, and he's talking about all the evil stuff happening with, Mordor growing in strength. I wish it need not have happened in my time. And Gandalf is, so do all who live to see such times, but it is not for them to decide what time they have. It's for them to decide what to do with the time that they are given. And he's like, oh, well, I wish the ring had not come to me because it's so evil. And he's talking about, like, in a way, evil's not the only force at work in the world. Like, in a way, Gollum was meant to find the ring, and in a way, Bilbo was meant to find it and take it from him. And in a way, the ring was meant to come to you. And that is an encouraging thought.
It is. I love Lord of the Rings so freaking much, man.
Literally every
time
I watch
I love Tolkien.
All right. Well,
I think another thing interesting that just kind of, we talked about the crucifixion and stuff. The Lord, he looked at the earth and he was sad that he created mankind because we were so evil. And yet he still
made a way for us.
He still kept Noah's family alive. And then through their lineage, through King David's lineage, Jesus. And Jesus took on all the wrath for all these people talked about in here.
Yeah.
He took on the wrath of God for all of mankind. Like, God's wrath still gets poured out on those who don't accept the gift. But he took out the wrath.
He took it upon himself nonetheless.
Yeah.
that is a very beautiful picture of that. Just that early, even back then, he had the art as a picture of Christ.
It's a constant.
Yeah.
This is also another.
I love the Bible, man. It's so the way everything connects.
When people say that the Bible doesn't
have a meme
like contradicts itself,
I don't think I'll be able to show it to you.
It is
but
the
I can
most.
show it to them.
It is the most beautiful story. It's not even just the most beautiful story. It's the most beautiful history of the world. Like when people are like, "Oh, and then Thor fought Jormungandr and Odin died." Like, no, that's stupid.
Okay.
It's
Big fat guy with big hammer fighting giant snake and a one-eyed wizard dies. That's pretty dope.
It's pretty dope, but
the Lord of Hosts and angel armies crushing the head of the snake.
No. All right. Well,
yeah.
I think we're good.
God himself crushing the head of the snake.
Yeah. I think we're good to cut there now. So next episode will be about Noah and the flood and all those things. We were hoping for the month of June to do theology of the body. That obviously did not work out for us. Poor and scheduling issues. There were so many this month it just wouldn't have worked. So apologize for that. But yeah, our next episode will be about Noah and the flood and leading up to the Tower of Babel. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're on Spotify, go ahead and answer the question we put down. Share your thoughts on what you thought about this episode. Anything you guys have to add. YouTube, like and subscribe. Comment on the video.
Also, YouTube, it was an airsoft gun.
Thank you for. Hope you enjoyed this somewhat more laid back. Did you think it was more laid back?
I don't know.
Less rushed. More unhinged episode.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think we had a lot of good stuff.
It was good.
It was a good
I
episode.
think there was a lot of good points.
Hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I had fun.
Yeah.
You had fun.
We're all tired now, though. Like, this is fun to do.
Stop! You're so gay.
No, I'm not.
You're so
gay if you don't think it's gay.
Drew, literally 20
I am
minutes
not
ago.
aroused.
Poppy.
I am not aroused.
You sure about that?
If you're aroused, that's your problem.
I'm not aroused.
Then what's the problem?
In fact, it makes me angry.
I'm gonna go touch my
It makes
wife.
me want to... Anyway, thank you for watching.
Not like that.
Yeah, we've been chief among them. Again, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. Leave a comment on YouTube or on Spotify. Share on the comment I have. And yeah, share it with people you know. Spread the word. We'd love more people to hear our discussions and to have inputs. And yeah.
Also, if you know anybody who works at Liquid Death, you should tell them to sponsor us.
You should sponsor us, Liquid Death. That'd be great.
Anyway. Also, if you're on Spotify, you should check out the YouTube video, at least for the first few minutes, because the joke at the beginning makes more sense when you can see what we're doing.
That is true. That's true. Anyway. Adios.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Love you all.
Be gone!
Thanks for putting up with our stupidity and
You
rambling.
hate our listeners, or
No. They probably just have better things to do now.
that's fair.
I'm
Thank you for wasting your time.
Thank you for wasting your time on
It's
our
not a
rambling.
waste of time. Just